Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another Talk Architecture podcast and YouTube recording on sensory-driven architecture and how using the principles will help you create inclusive and therapeutic spaces. So we had part one, and now this is part two. And the part two is going to be about sensory-driven architecture principles based on a literature search on the internet. And I haven't been to any of these buildings, but I will try my best to explain the principles based on this literature search. So we start with what are the sensory-driven architecture principles? We come up with 7 for a start, meaning that this is not exhaustive. This is still an idea that is to be expanded and to be understood because, let's face it, there's a lot of terms out there regarding the 5 senses and more. So this is looking at the 5 senses, except for taste, plus that means 4 senses and 3 extra senses on temperature, thermal comfort, movement, kinesthetic awareness, and emotional resonance, human-centered experience. So we'll start with the first example or case study, which is Tadao Ando's Church of the Light, Osaka, Japan, which uses precise slits in the concrete walls to allow sunlight and create dramatic movement light patterns to create a spiritual ambience. And if you were to look from inside the sermon space where you have the cross, you see it is the light coming through those slits that make it so dramatic. Now we look at this first principle, which is sight, visual engagement. Another word for sight is visual engagement, and dynamic lighting. So the definition is designing spaces with thoughtful use of light, color, form, and spatial composition to create visually stimulating and harmonious environments. This includes natural light, shadow play, and visual connections to the surroundings. Another example is using color contrast and gradients, such as in Louis Barragan's Casa Giardi, Mexico City, which emphasize using yellow color, the walls to create emotional warmth and visual engagement. So again, this is the definition of what we need to do when you want to create visual engagement. We're going now to the other senses, which is sound or acoustic harmony. And here we focus on the material selection for acoustics. What is apparent is that, of course, in a performance space, such as a concert hall, like Elbphilharmonie, Hamburg by Herzog de Meuron, we see the sculpted gypsum fiber panels to diffuse sound evenly and creating a rich auditory experience for the concert event. So this is again another principle on acoustic harmony, where crafting acoustic experiences through material choices and spatial configurations that balance soundscapes, such as incorporating elements that dampen noise or enhance desired sounds like water features or natural echoes. Another example is, of course, using the water features is Thermavals, Switzerland by Peter Zumthor, which use channels to create gentle meditative dripping sounds. And we have another use of another sense, which is a sense of touch, which is a tactile experience, and using the idea of varied surface textures. So in here, in the Sankakla Mosque, Istanbul by Emre Aralat, there is a contrast of materials based on function at the ablution area. It is used throughout the mosque if you were to visit the mosque. So what is this principle about? Is using textures, materials, and surfaces that invite physical interactions such as smooth, rough, warm, or cool finishes to evoke tactile sensations and connect users with the space. Also on touch and tactile experience, the ergonomic detailing is essential. And here we have a building built before all this inclusivity and universal design started. Back then, Alvar Aalto's Paimio Sanatorium in Finland features the wooden handrails designed for patient comfort and ease of use. So here we have a tactile, a detailing that is so fine and understanding what the user needs. We were looking for the principle on smell or olfactory design and the use of natural material sense. And modern architecture, with all its polishing of the wooden material, you can't really smell the wood. And compare that to maybe tropical old houses which use timber, you can really smell the wood. So there was a assertion that Tadao Ando's building actually have a cedarwood smell, but unfortunately it is not so. So I'm giving you an example of an installation robot moths in kelp lanterns, biologizing the machine by Tentacular Trouble by Anika Yee. So this is in a space where there's an installation and the smell is evident. So here, natural material sense would mean as well to integrating elements that engage the sense of smell, such as plants, ventilation systems, or materials with distinct scents to evoke memories or create a specific balance. And it's much more telling in this traditional Malay house called the Rumah Uda Manap at the Rimbun Dahan by Angela Hijaz, which is the wife of Hijaz Kasturi, a famous architect in Malaysia. Around this Malay traditional house are a large expanse of garden, tropical garden, which have a lot of variety of plants. And the sense of it in terms of the scale and the smell and so create more multisensorial experience to one having gone through the spaces here. And you could have also the sense of smell here from the plants because of the permeability with the walls, the wooden slats, allowing that sense of smell to creep into the house. And so the house is made of timber. We have now going into the fifth principle, which is temperature, thermal comfort. And here we focus on material thermal properties. For the Malik architecture's house of three streams in India, the stone walls to keep interiors cool in a hot climate helps with temperature control or the comfort in terms of thermal comfort. So this is leading into the designing for thermal perception through passive heating or cooling or material choices that respond to climate, ensuring spaces feel comfortable and responsive to human touch and presence. And also another example of this is, of course, looking into the passive cooling stroke heating. In this case, in Dhaka, Bangladesh, the Bait-ur-Roof Mosque by Marina Tabassum, the architects, use perforated brick walls for airflow so to make the interior cool in a humid climate. So, and here, of course, is passive cooling rather than heating. But when you talk about thermal comfort in temperate countries, is heating, of course. So in this example, we are covered by the principle where designing for thermal perception through passive cooling or material choices that respond to climate, ensuring spaces feel comfortable and responsive to human touch and presence. Another set of principles is movement, kinesthetic awareness, curved pathways. Curved pathways is created to have a flow of being aware of the space. In Tashima Art Museum, Japan, by Rue Nishizawa, you can see that the smooth curved floors that guide visitors effortlessly in the space. So this is under the principle we're creating spaces that encourage dynamic interaction, such as fluid circulation paths, varying ceiling heights, or spatial transitions that guide the body through the environment intuitively. Another example of the movement or kinesthetic awareness is spatial transitions. Now, effectively, Daniel Libeskind has done so in the Jewish Museum in Berlin, where using sharp angles and sloping floors to create a disorienting experience and provoking path. So, because of the Jewish Museum depicting the Jewish people histories and in Berlin. So this is trying to evoke those emotions. So this is under, the creating of spaces that encourage dynamic interactions, such as fluid circulation paths, varying ceiling heights, or spatial transitions that guide the body through the environment intuitively. You will feel that you question the emotions of using the space, and that is in the spatial transition principle. So the seventh sensory-driven architecture principle is emotional resonance, where there is a human-centered experience and using proportional harmony, as shown in the Sainte-Chapelle, Paris, uses soaring yet proportionately Gothic arches to evoke reverence and uplifting feeling. So when you want to have a proportional harmony in emotional resonance, you're designing with empathy to evoke emotional responses. In this case, spiritual feelings that you have, in a sense, to be awed by the presence of God or the house of God, fostering a sense of belonging, calm, or inspiration by aligning the space with human needs, cultural context, and sensory balance. In the cultural context aspect, we again have the Sankakla Mosque, Istanbul, by Emre Aralat, using minimalizing design rooted in Islamic architecture traditions, creating a sense of spiritual belonging. So here we have the use of the stone and the use of horizontal vertical elements in the landscape in which this mosque is set. So water elements. This makes for the designing with empathy to the user to evoke emotional response, exactly what we said earlier with the church. And you could feel the contextuality in this. Now we're done with the sensory-driven principles that we've done by literature search. And we again look at what is not happening out there. Because we have some of those examples to embody a secure and trustful space that is therapeutic with those case studies. And some may be similar to universal design principles as well. For example, the mosque, where you have choices, hence closer to inclusive spaces. We ask again how the sensory-driven architecture principles that we propose may guide the architect to design for multi-sensorial experience. That is the ultimate goal of architecture excellence for the user. We noted that these examples were either museums, religious and spiritual settings, houses and special buildings. What about the more commercial or mundane buildings like schools, hospitals, offices, and shopping malls? For example, the teaching hospital in Kuala Lumpur main corridor. On how nature is not part of the experience, true. However, nature is right outside and it is like segregated from the space, not getting the best sensorial experience. So the idea from the beginning is that hospitals need to, when they design hospitals, it's sterile and clean, and people need to walk through the whole length without stop, not even benches. And there are lobbies, but they're often crowded in this hospital. So there are high levels of noise as well, glare from the lights, and the need to wait longer, even hours on end. So the vision and hearing senses are challenged, especially in hospital lobbies. And also in this particular main corridor when there are a lot of people going in from one end to another, linking the different towers. So design pocket areas of the main ones, courtyard and gardens for relief, benches, and better tactile design or the sense of touch for children to engage would make it a better sensorial experience. So funny enough, this particular hospital built in 1965, there are some courtyards which now they close it off. So you can't have access to those courtyards while waiting, in which you could relieve some of the stress that the people waiting for the doctors and clinic would have. Where hospitals are focus activity, wait and see the doctor, shopping malls, goers or shoppers, you can see a different sort of behavior. And they are everywhere in their thoughts. They may be thinking about lunch today when I'm very hungry while waiting for, there's a queue here, and I'm not sure what the queue is about, but there's a lot of events and offers and discounts in which people like to go and use the phones in which they will get these discounts, and they are blocking the way or something like that. So these corridors are often very busy, and when you examine the user's behavior in the architectural spaces, just observe them and their response to the design environment. And this case studies is very valuable when you start designing for a shopping mall. So compared to a hospital, we know that the people in the mall are in their own world, not looking where they're walking. They're in different paces. So they're not with you. People have different paces in the shopping mall. Having options of how to walk, maybe a travelator for people who know where they're going and they want to go faster. If the mall is big, for those who are tired, benches placed not in the way of travel, but in between railings or designed into the void, and people's behavior in malls also at more leisurely and browsing, it is a recreational thing that they're having. So people just walk around and not really doing a lot of stuff. So with this in mind, we need to cater to a lot of the needs of the people in the mall to make it less of a horrendous experience while shopping. So the mundane spaces like offices that we know of, I've been in office before, and I know that you're in your cubicle, and if you want to go to the toilet, you go to the toilet, and if you want to, when there's lunchtime, then you go off, and hours on end, you'll be sitting in the office. But the whole idea of the office building is is a challenge to Kevin Martlow to design in the Petaling Jaya Trade Center, which is one of the winners of an award, how to make it more of sensory driven. So I just like go through that. This is one of the brochures, and I got permission from Kevin to go and show from his book, but this is from a brochure. And I noticed that there's this particular space at a car park is where there's the benches, and Kevin did ventilation blocks with natural vegetation growing on them. But there is like astroturf here. I mean, the artificial grass, which he did not design for, which you will see later. But what is notable is how he approached the design to create a sensory-driven architecture. From the start, he looked at the Songket pattern, which is like a plate pattern on the left, and then he created the ventilation block and the brickwork to address how the new design for an office building could be done and the orientation of it and how it would benefit from not being hit by the sun indirectly or by, where the ones that is going to be hit by the sun, the facade. So also there are spaces with enough volume in them to have plants. But anyway, I was referring to this one on the left where Kevin designed to a certain extent, but the designers finish it up later. So here's the example of the high volumes to have the plants in. So you have, coming into the office, different experience of spaces, and there's also natural ventilation and outdoor feeling where the toilets are as well. So there's always places of refuge or relief when you at this building, and the sameness and the mundaneness of having to deal with everyday office experience. So we go back to sensory-driven architecture informing inclusive and therapeutic spaces. We're trying to link those principles that we've engaged earlier, that I've shown the case studies earlier, to engage with this type of principles in order to get the goal of therapeutic and inclusive spaces that we asked before in part one, which is having a space that you feel trustful, you can feel secure and safe and is usable and accessible as well. So in the end goal is that once you have achieved a multisensorial, at least engage with more of the sensory-driven principles, and then you could have a more therapeutic, inclusive spaces. That's assertion of the proposition. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast and also the YouTube video, watching it with me. And that's part two and the conclusion. And thank you so much and all the best.